We're live.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Thursday night Generational Change live stream. I'm Jen.
I'm Suave. I'm Peter. Yeah.
You smell clean.
Well, I'm fresh and clean.
You do smell
fresh
clean.
and so clean.
You
clean.
are clean.
And we are.
Hello, all. We have a lot going on tonight.
It's an exciting evening,
like
but it's a tragic evening. It's a sad evening. Why is it a sad evening?
Well, we're talking Israel, so that's always kind of depressing.
No. Tonight is the last.
What is tonight?
Hey, you're not going to be in studio for almost
a month. That's that. I would think you'd be celebrating and having like a party.
I'm pretending like I care right now.
So
but,
yes, I am going to be in Asheville for the next month. I'll be tuning in from there. Be working. Peter will be here. And
I'll be trying to hold it down.
Yeah. And so I think it'll be fun. And we'll find all sorts of, I'm going to find all sorts of cool, interesting things to be, recording. We're not going to be violent tonight. Peter's not going to be violent.
We'll do our best.
I'm going to do my best. Although we are talking about Israel, Palestine, but
it's going to be hard to avoid the violence.
We're going to try to contain ourselves.
Yeah. How do you guys like the way I wrote generational change out?
It's terrible.
I think you can make it out.
And the reason for that is because we have two main guests, two people, two speakers tonight, basically. And I can barely get more than 7 letters across on that. So that is what it is. So.
Yeah, but we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah,
obviously
we do.
We could rush, but I don't think there's any point in rushing. I think we should, just enjoy the evening and do what we have to do.
That's so chill of you.
Well, that is, again, we're, we have a special guest in studio who's working behind the scenes tonight. Our good friend, Anthony Paz from our campaign.
Woo-hoo!
He rocks.
Anthony was our field director, and he just can't get enough of us. He just cannot get enough of us.
About generational change that's just really appealing to a lot of people.
He's just somebody who's part of our mission.
Well, that's something
he's on our mission.
Well, if you have a really good movement, I think there's something to be said for the commitment that you have when you feel the camaraderie, that you really get a sense that people are on the same mission, even if they don't all agree with the same thing.
I really think you should be helping me write this book, because that's part of one of the things that I'm writing about. I know we've talked about that.
But one of the things that we're going to talk about, and our first guest coming on is going to be Reverend Wendy Hamilton from Washington, D.C., is not just obviously a lot of things going on in terms of her race against Representative Norton, as well as DC statehood, but I see the endearing value of the Yang Gang and what that has meant in terms of building a multi-racial, multinational coalition of people that agree that we need to be thinking about how do we improve our economy, our daily lives. How do we build a coalition?
How do we do that?
How do we get? Well,
I don't
stop
know.
with
How
the
do
petty
we do
BS.
That? How do we do
it's
that?
Very
Peter?
hard.
You've got the ideas. I don't know how to do that.
Well, it's again, and we'll address that. When she comes on. But that again is the importance here of recognizing that the only way that this movement is going to sustain itself is if people recognize that the primary issues that we're fighting for is what's more important than getting bogged down in the minutia of the little things that you can't control. Because no one is going to agree 100% of the time. That to me seems to be the hardest thing for people to wrap their minds around. And so when I think about, just like...
So are we just now going to just be platforming everybody? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying...
Like everybody? Do we have any sort of...
we're not platforming the dog catcher necessarily. But
what's our litmus test, Peter?
I think our litmus test should be anybody who is not taking corporate money, who believes in a non-corporate, non-partisan movement focused on growing labor. And of course, labor is how you grow the working/middle class.
If you want, what are our 3 points are, which is that, yes, it's nonpartisan, it's non-corporate and nonpartisan, but it has to be people that are seeing this as a term of service and not really in it for themselves. And that is, that is the other underlying sort of theme of people that we have on. That
is very true. And you are going to find that very quickly, because despite everything that's been learned over the last 5 years, there are a lot of people who are jumping into things that they're not looking before they leap. And that's a big mistake. And we don't want to be making those mistakes. We want to be building sustainability for the long term. That is the key. Yeah. And I think we are on our way to being able to do that. And sometimes you have to figure out what it is going to take in order to do that. And you have to take chances. Now, unfortunately, one of the things that is of great importance that we are going to be discussing right off the bat with Wendy is about what happened with her current representative, which is what you call impeding progress. And those are the things that we are trying to avoid. You really want to be avoiding impeding progress, because that is our biggest conundrum that we're trying to fight for right now.
So in your schedule in your head that you're running right now,
schedule in my head,
are we going to just go? Let's just go right into that then, and do that, and we'll just put off.
We will deal with news. We will deal with news and amuse after the fact. And that,
and I
as
also,
well as
guys,
our
tonight
group
I have a very special story time.
Yes, we've got a lot of interesting story time stuff
yes,
to talk about.
tonight is a story time. I
But
think you all really like it.
You're going to enjoy a lot of what we're doing tonight. So you guys better stick around because this is going to probably be about 2 hours long, but it's going to be fun. So without further ado, we are going to bring in a lovely, lovely lady who is running to be the next congressional representative of our nation's capital. And without further ado, let's welcome in Reverend Wendy Hamilton.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
You look like you're ready to take us to church, so let's do it, baby.
Let's get it, all right? Let me get the offering plate first. You know, that's how we work. Let's circulate the offering plate and then we can talk. But how are you doing?
We're good. So talk a little bit about your background, where, you know, how you got into this race. Like, I guess what people want to know is your why, but, you know, just talk a little bit about yourself for a bit, and then we'll talk about the district.
Great. Well, I can just say, for those who may not know who I am, Reverend Wendy Hamilton, RevWendyForCongress.com to get all of that information. But I'm a mother, I'm a minister, I'm an educator, and a social justice advocate. And so for me, politics and ministry actually cross paths when you start talking about looking out for the poor and the oppressed and the widow. And you know, I could go into different scriptures about that. But for me, public service is ministry. And so while I do work, and while I'm a former pastor, unfortunately, our church, due to the pandemic, like many churches, ultimately made the decision to close. And so I'm still in touch and still actively attending Zoom meetings. But I was actually at that time, before the pandemic actually started to take off, I was pastoring a small church here in rural Maryland, which is right outside of the District of Columbia. But I've always been involved in politics. I've always volunteered. I've phone banked. I've helped out. You can't live in the District of Columbia and not pay attention to politics, right? You can't even stand in Starbucks and have a conversation and not know what was the latest bill that's being held up by Manchin in the Senate. But anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. For me, it was always a natural inclination to be involved and to keep up. So I started volunteering a little bit, even around the Obama administration. I did some phone banking. That's about the extent that I had gotten involved in that, to that level, until Andrew Yang came along. And Andrew Yang, I read about him in 2018, February 2018, very early on. He had just filed, and he was presenting this idea of universal basic income, which I had not heard about until that time. And the way in which he was presenting it then was the threat of automation and how many jobs were going to be, and were already being automated away, and what we were facing in the future, and how we needed to provide a lifeline for folks. Well, that resonated with me because I remembered my grandparents, you know, working in factories growing up that got automated away their jobs or got shipped overseas, and they had nothing to fall back on. You can't ask my grandfather to leave the assembly line and go code, right? So that resonated with me. I reached out to the campaign and got a chance to ultimately join the staff as the spiritual and cultural outreach director. But when you're on a campaign, now you get to see how the sausage is made. Now you're behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it's not always pretty, but I have to say that sparked in me something you all were alluding to early on, that running for office has to be something deeper than just advancing yourself. It has to be about something larger than you just wanting to become known or gain clout. And so for me, this push for universal basic income, for progressive policies that made a tangible difference in people's lives, that signed me up for those. And we definitely need those in the District of Columbia. And so it just made sense over the summer as I watched our democracy being tampered with, and we did not know, that's to say it lightly, and we did not know what the outcome of the election was going to be in November. I thought to myself, I cannot stand idly by. And
okay, so talk a little bit about your current representative and, you know, why you feel that, or why it's probably obvious that it's somebody who is not really working for the people, or is no longer working for the people, and where you see the deficiencies, especially regarding DC, what your priorities would be for that.
My priorities are really, for me, to present myself as an authentic representative of the voices of the people. You know, the incumbent has been in the office for 30 years. And there comes a time in my mind where we need to step aside and allow the future to take place. Progress is inevitable. And what I was seeing and what I was hearing and still am hearing on the ground is people don't feel like they're being authentically represented. They're not feeling like they're being heard. They're not feeling like the representatives are presenting themselves in a way to be held accountable for not doing what they've been put in office to do.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
and so for me, it was more about, while I say in some regard, I'm not running against Eleanor Holmes Norton, I'm running for DC, but yes, I am. I mean, right. Eleanor is the incumbent. And so in theory, yes, I am running against her. I am running to be the next representative, and preferably a voting one once we get statehood rights. But at the same time, I am running for the people of DC, to be the authentic voice, to have representation on the Hill that looks like, sounds like, and feels like the residents of the District of Columbia.
We're speaking with Reverend Hamilton, who is running for Congress to represent our nation's capital. Reverend, I think one of the things that's probably one of the most obvious things when it comes to DC is obviously housing. It is amazing just from the last time that Jen and I were in DC. I mean, the homeless encampments are everywhere. You literally can't turn a corner.
Yeah.
It got to the point where it was so clear that it was starting to get to the elites that Wolf Blitzer felt the need to say something to Speaker Pelosi about it. She didn't think very highly of him doing that, but it's almost like, yeah, when it's in your face, it's like there's no way you can avoid
it's the
talking about
irony,
this issue.
though.
Right.
Isn't it that's our nation's capital? I mean, it's really...
Well, all too often, it's like if you are not on the outskirts of DC, basically North DC, which is, one of the tougher areas, versus like, let's say, living in Georgetown, you pretend like it doesn't exist, or you just don't see it. And once you do see it, you can't unsee it.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the genuine, authentic voice of DC, because folks, you have to come across Pennsylvania Avenue. You have to come off of Constitution Avenue and come into, you said North DC, maybe Northwest DC, come up east of the river, come over here to Southeast DC where I live, over in Ward 7 and Ward 8.
That's where Max lives. We were there. We actually have somebody, we were at somebody's house that actually lives there, and you hear just gunshots.
So how can I represent you when I won't even come talk to you? When I don't even have the fullness of the experience that's happening with you right now. So, part of that is the minister in me, right? We sit and we have presence, we talk with people, we validate their feelings. And so for me, that skill set sort of translates over into representation, because some people said to me, well, Reverend Wendy, we like what you have to say. Why run for Congress? Why not do city council? Why not do mayor? Why not start? And I said, because you have to go where you believe your gifts and your strengths are. Administrator, I'm not an administrator. I'm not going to be able to keep the police chief and the mayor from fighting, and the police chief from fighting each other to me. That's not my strength. But if you want me to advocate, if you want me to write policy, if you want me to author bills, if you want to represent the masses from an authentic place, that's where my skill set lends best. And so that's why I felt it was time to run for Congress. And also, I don't need permission to do that. And Jen,
you know what? No, you don't. And I say that because I know firsthand, when you tell people that you're running against their incumbent, that they look at you. I actually have people like, that's Debbie's seat. And I'm like, no, actually it belongs to the people of District 23, but her ass has been sitting in it so long, I could see why you think it's hers.
Well, therein lies though, Jen, because I got the same thing,
Yeah.
I said, that's the people's seat.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you say.
That's I mean, we said the exact same thing, because people said, well, is she retiring? Is Eleanor retiring? I was like, if you all retire her, that's not an appointed seat. That's an elected seat.
But they sit there like it's a fiefdom and it's a monarchy. And then our district in particular is bad like that.
And because you're running, basically on the humanity forward premise, that this is much worse on the Democratic side than it is on the Republican side.
Oh my gosh.
There is this notion, and I think it probably has more to do with the fact that particularly right now in the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, there's a lot of older representatives.
Yeah,
that's putting it mildly.
And the district that, is just to the north that borders is Steny Hoyer's district. And he is somebody who has been there forever. There is this idea that—
Shout out Michaela Wilkes.
Yeah, Michaela Wilkes. Gotta love that girl.
5, Maryland.
Yeah, for real. And there's this idea that you're not— and maybe this is something you could speak more to, because I do think this is something we do see very often in the Black community, where it's an unwritten rule. You are not supposed to challenge incumbents of your own. It's like it's an unwritten rule.
It is.
If you do it, you're considered persona non grata, basically.
And they really believe, and not only that, but a lot of these people that sit in these seats, they truly believe that they are the person who is entitled to decide who to bequeath their seat to.
Well, we just saw that with Alcee Hastings.
This is not a joke. Like, they actually believe, we know this, that they are entitled to choose their successor. Like it's some sort of monarchy. And how dare you? You're not waiting your turn. There were people in line for that seat. I can't stand that. I can't even begin to tell you.
And again, that's impeding progress in the most clearest way
we feel
possible.
you.
Well, one of the things that at my launch back in January, because I did recognize, because I'm running against a 30-year incumbent, I need to establish name recognition and that. So we got an early start, right? But at my launch, there was a reporter there, and he came to me with that. So how do you feel about the fact that, Delegate Norton is like a beloved grandmother, in this community, and that you're going to be seen as coming against her? And I said, I respect her and I respect that sentiment. But we also ultimately know that it's up to the people to decide, and the people have earned the right to have an option and a choice. And that's who I'm taking my message to. I'm not asking permission. I'm not asking to be approved. I'm not asking to be signed off on. And so, yes, you alluded to, in the African-American community, there's sort of this level of respect. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. She's my elder, so you're not going to hear me tear her down. I was raised right. I'm not going to embarrass my family and be like that. But at the same time, I also was taught to speak and act upon my own agency and with my own voice, and not feel like I had to seek approval from anyone else other than God and myself in terms of what was the plan for my life. And so when I arrived at the decision to run for this position back in June, when I first thought about it, I didn't file till December, but by June I had made the decision. I knew it was bigger than me. And at the end of the day, like you all said, you have to remember that when you're doing something like this, it has to be for a reason that's deeper than just running.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly have an advantage running in a very urban area. There is a lot of ground that you can make up in terms of knocking on doors.
Yeah.
I still think meeting people face to face is a huge advantage when you're trying to unseat a long-term incumbent, whether it's on the first try or potentially second try. But the point is, I'm curious, and this is where we'll kind of wind down the conversation.
Okay.
Number one, what do you believe, and to this point, as of right now, separates you from the current representative? And what have you learned from your experience working with Andrew Yang and the Yang Gang that you feel is going to have long-term benefits in whatever road that might take you, as well as this humanity forward movement?
So to your first question, I think what sets me apart from the incumbent is that I have a vision for DC that goes even beyond statehood. One of the things that we found is that the whole conversation around politics, if you're going to run for any office here in the District of Columbia, that statehood has to be almost your only plank issue and nothing else is lifted up. But I've never believed that we were a one-dimensional city. And I also don't believe we can look at statehood and beyond. I'm running on a progressive platform of universal basic income, universal healthcare, all the things that we can make a reality when we get statehood. But until we cross that path, we don't have to put those things on hold. We can multitask. We've never been a one-dimensional city. And so I'm endeavoring as the candidate to move the conversation and the electorate beyond just statehood, because what it's showing, and this kind of goes into the second question that you asked, and what I hope to leave as a legacy in this race. I want to win, but I also want to, I want to leave a legacy in that as much as statehood is a very popular and emotional issue, it's not playing out in the data. And so for me, you can't be around Andrew Yang and be on his campaign and not pay attention to data. He's the data, the math guy.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is.
And in 2018, the previous primary, we don't look at 2020, that's kind of outlier because of, Trump and all of that.
Sure.
Previous primary 2018, turnout in this city, 493,000 likely voters, 89,000 turned out, 18%. It's incredibly low. We know midterms are typically low anyway, very, very low.
Yeah.
Why is the electorate not excited? We're highly registered. You go to our 8 wards where we got high registration numbers, but they're not coming out. So I'm talking to people on the street and I'm like, what's going on? What do you need? They said, we have no representation. They go over to Washington. They don't come over and find out what's happening with us. Statehood sounds good, but how's statehood going to put groceries on my table? How's statehood going to help me pay my bills and help me make the connection, and then maybe I'll get excited about coming out.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing, is trying to restart the hope in this city so that people will turn out.
I don't think we could have ended on a more positive note. That is exceptionally well said. But making DC a state may sound good, but it ain't going to put food on my table. And that, especially for a significant portion of people who live in our nation's capital, there are much more pressing issues than that. Reverend Hamilton, thank you so much. Website so everyone can find you and support you.
RevWendyForCongress.com.
FOR?
FOR, yes.
Okay.
RevWendyForCongress.com. Please check me out.
Hey guys,
check out the policy page. That'd be great.
Absolutely recommend that everybody go check out the Reverend. She is a lovely lady and has wonderful ideas. We need to continue to move the needle forward, and that's what Humanity Forward is all about. We appreciate you coming on. We hope to see you soon.
Appreciate you both. Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So needless to say, these are the types of things that I look at and think, yeah, this should get people excited. This isn't about the same old.
And what is interesting is the truth is whenever I do think about DC, all I think about is the statehood issue. That's the only thing that
anyone talks about.
But I also understand why DC residents would be somewhat defeatist about participating in electoral politics when they know that their representative doesn't get a vote.
That's true.
So it's like, I understand. I mean, it's pathetic enough when you just have a representative that stinks, but then have a representative that kind of stinks and doesn't have a vote. It's a little defeatist.
Well, and again, you're talking about the archaic nature of the way that a lot of people that have been on the Hill for a long time think. And for those of you who don't know, and again, we're not going to get into the mud on this issue, but we did ask Representative Norton to come on the show to talk about DC statehood. And she said, and I quote, "I am not speaking to anyone who ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz." So, okay, if that's how you want to treat it, then fine.
This is the problem with that. This is the problem with that. Well, one, I'm not a candidate. Like currently a candidate.
That's what that probably more than anything else. I was
it's annoying.
That doesn't make sense.
But what's so frustrating about it, okay, so think about this, people. This is a congressional representative whose job is to represent people and advocate for people. She was invited to go onto a platform to talk about her initiative for DC statehood, her legislation. And because of her relationship with a sitting congressperson, she won't go on a platform with somebody who previously ran against her, like in a democracy.
Well, that's why George.
It's like this personal. It's
again,
ridiculous.
it's as George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And the ones who are in it protect it like it's a fortress. That's basically, and no pun intended, but after what happened on January 6th, it's going to be a fortress now.
You know what,
They're
though?
going to treat it like that.
I feel like when I look at somebody like Representative Norton, that I just think it's a shame that the representative for DC doesn't that puts her personal feelings about a particular person ahead of what's in the best interest of her constituents. And that's really sad to me. And it's sad for the people of DC.
When you were running for Congress, I ran into Chris King in Orlando. And I asked him, would you consider giving Jen a look? You're very much against, big sugar, and you have a lot of progressive ideas. And you're like, I'm sorry, man, I'm friends with Debbie. And I'm just like, okay, maybe you're friends with her on a personal level, but on a professional level, I think you guys kind of disagree on a lot of major issues here.
Yeah.
And there is this lack of understanding that you really have to be able to separate the personal from the professional. And that is something that I think is lost on a lot of people. You can have a relationship on a personal level with somebody like some of my very good friends who are hardcore MAGA Trump supporters. On a personal level, I can get along with them. I can vehemently disagree with them. But if they ran for office and somebody who ran against them was somebody who shared my values and my ideas, I'm going to support that person.
Of course.
Like, that's what you're supposed to do.
It is. But it's ironic that the people that are involved in the electoral process don't really believe in democracy.
But that's
what's democracy?
But I think that is the lesson, as much as anything, that we are learning from Humanity Forward, from Andrew Yang's movement that he has started, is this idea that I don't want to hear about what coalition you're in or this or that. I want to talk about the issues at bar that are most important to us and that we are fighting for. Because if we are going to fight for them, we must cross-pollinate. It is absolutely necessary.
Cross-pollinate.
Well, that's
Speaking
your
of
word, I'm going to use
cross-pollinating,
your word for that.
But I also, going into the mountains, I think I should go back to my Pollinator of the Day series. It was very popular.
That'll be very important. But
I love it. I'm Pollinator of the Day series coming back up.
But speaking of which, as you guys know, this channel is horrifically suppressed. We have almost 7,000 subscribers and we don't have a lot of viewers all at once. But what we do want to do is try to build our Patreon as quickly as we can, because that's going to help us do a lot of the things like we did the other day, which was deliver 100 care packages for the homeless. And a great organization.
That was courtesy of my birthday fundraiser, which was really nice, you guys. That was really cool. So we did 100 hygiene packs, 100 pairs of socks. It was, and it was a good haul.
And so we're going to make it for this evening. And I think
this is a special. This is special. Okay.
So look what we've got here, guys. These are new stickers of the lovely Lulu.
She's actually not in here right now, but Lulu always makes her appearance on the show. So these are our new Generational Change Lulu stickers.
I've got it on my laptop already.
They're really cute. So for tonight, anybody who signs up tonight is a $5 or $10 Patreon, in addition to your other merch, will get the awesome Generational Change Lulu sticker.
How could you say no to that?
It's so cute. Look.
Ay.
So we need to, I think we need to move on. We need to facilitate.
We do. And so with that said, we want to try to keep this as an upbeat conversation as we can. But as we all know, the conversation of Israel-Palestine is not going away. And as much as people want to let this go under the radar right now, it's only going to exacerbate even more so, because bombing in Gaza has already continued, just as the ink was drying as Naftali Bennett became the new prime minister.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And so as much as we believe in, trying to have some type of a solution, there is no easy solution. But we must discuss the root causes of why we are where we are. And so without further ado, we're going to bring in two amazing guests.
Who I know. Do you know either of them?
I don't know
Okay,
them.
so this is cool. So Donna Nevel
but I
is
will
someone.
now.
Okay, Donna Nevel is someone that I met originally at an ICE detention center protesting. Basically how we treat people. And she is like an activist. Her husband's a civil rights lawyer, and she is somebody who is with Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a very important organization to me. I almost said Judas. I don't think so. And so it's very important to me as somebody who's Jewish and has been called a self-loathing Jew on a myriad of occasions. It's really important for me to connect with as many people as possible that I feel honestly see the picture like I see it. And I have some questions. And I'm drifting further to the left. And then George Bisharat is somebody that is on a board with me for Catch Fire, which is an organization that Eva Pitsova, a former candidate, BNT slate mate, started. And I met George through that, but he is a law professor and somebody who is very knowledgeable and specializes in Middle East affairs. And so I just thought this would be a really good discussion. And also, by the way, this is not a debate. So, because I don't debate.
Who says that this can't be a debate?
No.
I think anything can turn into a debate.
No, I'm not debating with anybody.
Good evening, Donna. Good evening, George. Welcome to Generational Change.
Thanks. So nice to see you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
By
Donna,
the way, I have a Lulu on the floor here with me too.
Oh, you do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What is your Lulu?
She's a sort of a Chihuahua mutt and my sweetheart.
Yes, no, my dog's the love of my life, and my husband and my children know this. It's not even a secret here. It's not even a secret.
Not at all. And dogs make life bitter. I mean, that's the bottom line.
I just thought, so on Monday night, we had Norman Finkelstein on, and we talked a lot about, the current issues, his opposition to, BDS. We talked a little bit about that, but just, a really good discussion. And also the problem with like the censorship in academia with pro-Palestinian voices. Like we focused on that. And I specifically did that because I really wanted to talk to the two of you about the history issue, because this is something as an American Jew. I was never taught about the Nakba. That was not part of the history. That we didn't learn that. That wasn't there. It was a people with no, or a land with no people for a people with no land, and that was it.
Right.
So like that was not taught. Nobody told us that people were displaced. Nobody told us that. Now, in retrospect, it's really stupid to think that you can have an ethnostate without an ethno cleanse. And now looking at it, it seems obvious, but can you, and I don't know, whichever one of you, I know you both are very knowledgeable on this. Like, will you talk a little bit about what the actual history is from when Israel became a Jewish state, which everyone, like I grew up thinking 1948, oh yes, there was just this land and now all of our people there. And now we just all go there. And that was it. That was all we were taught. We were taught nothing else about it. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit about whichever, jump in.
Donna, you want to go first?
No, why don't you start?
Okay, sure. So at the turn of the 20th century, Palestine, as it was then known, was under Ottoman control and was about 95% Palestinian Arab, mostly Muslim, but also a substantial Christian minority, of which, by the way, my family comes from, and about 5% Jewish. The Jews who lived there had lived there for centuries. Some of them had come they had fled the Spanish Inquisition and had come to Palestine. In fact, I happen to know a man whose family dispatched a ship to rescue Jews from the Inquisition in the 16th century. In any case, it was a majority Palestinian Arab country at the turn of the century. The Zionist movement, which was a movement of Jewish nationalism that was born in Europe and was both a response to anti-Semitism and also a mimicry, in a sense, of the ethnic nationalism that was characteristic, particularly of Central Europe at that time. So the Zionist movement seeking to create a Jewish homeland or a Jewish state somewhere, settled on Palestine for reasons of historical religious connections of Jews to that country. Began to cast around for help because Jews, the Zionist movement itself was not really capable of pulling this off alone, ended up seeking the support of the British, and it was provided because of Britain's strategic interest and also to some extent because of Christian Zionism in Britain. Lord Balfour, who was the British Foreign Secretary, who eventually signed a letter offering support to the Zionist movement, was himself a Christian Zionist and an anti-Semite. Christian Zionists and anti-Semitism go fairly closely together most of the time. And Lord Balfour's particular concern was to make sure that that progressive Jews, communist, socialist Jews who were facing persecution in Eastern Europe wouldn't immigrate to England. But, the aim was to funnel them elsewhere. So the British, fought in World War I. The Ottoman Empire was defeated. It was basically dismembered and divvied up among several powers. And Britain obtained a mandate, or under the League of Nations, it was charged with administering Palestine. And the Balfour Declaration, that was that letter that Lord Balfour offered to the Zionist movement, was incorporated into the terms of the mandate. And so it was the mandate was supposed to be fostering self-determination for the Palestinians, but also fostering the establishment of a Jewish, by this time it had become clear that it was seeking not just a homeland, but a state. Under British auspices, Jewish immigration, Jews immigrated in great numbers, especially, in response to and as a consequence of the Nazi Holocaust in World War II. By 1948, the Jewish population had grown to about 30%, 33% maybe, and Jews had been purchasing land in order to establish a land base for a Jewish state, but had only succeeded in purchasing about 7% of the land. The rest of it was owned by the native Palestinian population. So there's more to the story, but to kind of speed it up, the United Nations took on the issue. The British kind of threw up their hands. They said, we can't reconcile these two competing obligations to Palestinian nationalism on the one hand, the Zionist movement on the other. So we're leaving on May 15th, 1948, or May 14th, 1948. And that was the date on which Israel declared its independence. Prior to that, within Palestine, a civil war basically had started. Both sides, the Palestinians were armed, the Zionist movement was armed, and the exodus of Palestinians, the forced displacement of Palestinians began actually before the state was founded. There were roughly 300,000 Palestinians who had been driven into exile before the establishment of the State of Israel on May 15th, 1948. There was a massacre, for example, at the village of Deir Yassin in April of 1948, so a month before Israel was created, in which the numbers vary, but at least 100 Arab civilians were killed by Jewish militias. And there was basically a campaign throughout the country to drive Palestinians out. There was a very simple reason for this, and that is that between their overwhelming ownership of the land and because of their preponderance as people, as just the population, there was the land and the demographic balance for a Jewish state simply didn't exist. They had to be expelled. Ethnic cleansing was a foundational necessity of the state. That's plenty to start with, and I should probably allow.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing to me, like I said, in retrospect, that I didn't just know that. Like even as I was able to sort of think about the factual history, it just sort of occurred to me, well, of course, there's ethnic cleansing. How else could you have an ethnostate if you don't ethno-cleanse? So Donna, would you talk a little bit about what is the Nakba, what that means to the Palestinian people, and basically how that relates to what we're seeing today in terms of the uprisings from the occupation, from the treatment of Palestinians in Israel, just basically from like the idea of the Nakba and how that has led to basically an apartheid state.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm glad I asked you to go first, because that was in such a short amount of time. You really got a lot of history in there. Well, first of all, I want to speak from my perspective. I'm a white US Jew who cares deeply about this issue, and also have devoted and think it's my obligation to do work within the communities I'm part of. So what you were saying before about not knowing about the Nakba, it is true we didn't learn about it in our Jewish education. It's also true we didn't learn about it in US textbooks. But I think it's important to say that it's not because the information wasn't out there. Palestinians have been not only telling their stories, but that history had been out there since well before the Nakba and leading up to it. And so I feel like it's a particular obligation for those of us, and I speak again as a US Jew, to know that history, to learn that history. And because once you do, you can't enter into the same place where you did before knowing it. And so I think it's really important. I think as for those of us who are activists on this, I think knowing the history of the Nakba, knowing what led up to the expulsion of over 750,000 Palestinians from their land and their home. And of course, it's the ongoing Nakba, because we see it happening and being carried out today, is really, that foundation. It's really where all else comes. And when we talk about Zionism, when people ask about Zionism, I say, let's talk about the impact of Zionism, the consequences of Zionism. That's the Nakba. People can have, many times people will say, well, but there was this strain of thought and there was that strain of thought. And my response is, yes, there were many theoretical discussions, but how Zionism played out on the ground is what Zionism is and what Zionism was. And that's I mean, when they had the Basel program, that's where they launched political Zionism in the late 1890s. And, one of the things that you realize is that they, of course, knew there was an indigenous Palestinian population, not one mention of it. And in fact, I wrote down, it just says, it's the establishment of a publicly and legally secured home for the Jewish people. And Theodore Herzl said, I founded the Jewish state. And and he said something about, and we'll see it play out in 50 years or more. So the foundation for colonizing Palestine, that had its indigenous population already living there in thriving towns and cities. And, it's just, if you see which I'm sure many have, the images and the photos and the visuals of life in pre-48 Palestine, it really responds to that myth. It really destroys that myth, a land for people, people without a land. Yeah, I'd land without a people for people without a land. And so, yeah, so I mean, I guess that's what I would say at this moment, that I think it's a process that, and for those of us, again, who aren't Palestinian, all we have to do is, open our eyes and our ears, and those stories, those testimonies, the archival histories, the texts are there right in front of for all of us to see. So maybe I'll stop.
Why do you think it's so hard to do? Somebody needs to turn their volume down. Whose volume is up? Does somebody have speakers turned up?
I don't think so. I can.
Sorry, Jen, if you don't mind, I just want to add that the reason you and many others have not heard about the Nakba is because Palestinian voices have been very actively suppressed. That is, it's not just an accident that you haven't heard from Palestinians before, and because the Zionist movement before the founding of the state and the state of Israel since has actively engaged in disinformation about this from the get-go. There was a committee that was called the Transfer Committee that was headed by a man by the name of Joseph Weitz that planned the Nakba, and that not only planned the Nakba itself, but also planned the talking points, essentially, about the fact, claims that Palestinian refugees had fled of their own accord, or they had been ordered to leave by Arab generals. And there was a whole sort of network of myths that were propagated and that we still hear today. I was debating with an Israeli historian just last week, and it sounded like he was reading out of a book from 1948 in terms of the propaganda that he was spewing about the causes of the Palestinian exodus. The simple fact is Israel couldn't have existed, couldn't have been founded without ethnic cleansing. They didn't have the land, they didn't have the people, and it was only by expelling the people. And I should mention, it is only because of their continuing exclusion. It's not just that they were expelled in 1948. They have been barred from returning. Their villages have been destroyed. They're and planted over with trees by the Jewish National Fund. And so it is a whole campaign of disinformation and erasure, deliberate erasure of the history. That's really what explains the general lack of awareness about this.
Right. And it's not remotely surprising to me, because essentially what this is it's what we did to the Native Americans is what they're doing over there. It's imperialism, and and in order to really do that, you have to be committing genocide. Apparently, that just needs to be the thing. And so when we look at what Israel is now, and we look at the people that are living in the West Bank, and we look at Gaza, those are the descendants of the people that have been displaced. Is that, correct? Like, that's because nobody wakes up and says, yeah, I'm moving to Gaza. Right? Like, that's not a thing.
That's fair.
Right.
No, it's infuriating that people are born in captivity. To me, it's infuriating. If it were orcas, we would not be tolerating it.
70% of the residents of the Gaza Strip are refugees from 1948. People who were forced out, most of them from the southern region, which is adjoining the Gaza Strip. Some of them, however, had fled by the sea. It's ironic, the Zionist movement in Israel has always talked about the Arab countries trying to drive the Jews into the sea. In fact, during the Nakba, the Palestinians were driven into the sea. And some of them fled that way, some of them fled to the Gaza Strip. But now 70% of that population of about 2 million people in that tiny strip of land are refugees.
Donna, let me ask you this as a fellow Jew in this country. When you talk like this to people, and even I'm sure it's even more so for people your generation, like that age group, it's a very fear-based mentality when it comes to Israel. It's this very post-Holocaust fear-based mentality where if something happens to Israel, if there's no Jewish state, how can we exist? How can we exist? It won't be safe for us to be anywhere if there's no Jewish state. And it's so hard to reason with people that are unreasonable. And I find that that's like one of the biggest challenges. And I was wondering, Donna, like, I'm sure you've faced this from, I'm not the only person that's been called a self-loathing Jew. I know.
Well, of course, there's been a lot of change, I think, and it's a process. I want to just go back. I want to address what you're saying, but also go back to one thing about the Israeli propaganda, the Hasbara, which actually means propaganda. It's an official campaign. It's with U.S. Zionist organizations and Israel. And it's a campaign. It's interesting today when people say, oh my God, if you say something critical of Israel, you're accused of anti-Semitism. Yeah. That goes way back. That's not a new thing. It's a key Hasbara point. You don't address the content of the point. You accuse the person. You can't attack the message, so you attack the messenger. And that's a long tactic. I believe that there's increasing openness. I've seen it. I do. As I've said, I'm a huge believer in community education as a critical part of our organizing. I'm part of a project now where it's a Palestinian Nakba curriculum that I'm part of a center, PARCEO, Participatory Research Center, that's working in partnership with a new project called Project 48, led by a Palestinian strategist and activist, Nadia Sa. And we're doing a curriculum for universities, for high schools. It's going to soon be public, and it's been a lot of work, a long time in the making. Of course, it roots and is central. It centers Palestinian voices, experience, histories, testimonies, archives, challenges this notion of why are so many archives such a threat? Recently there's been much more coming out about the looting that went on. Of course, it was always true, but now it's like, so there's a lot of archives that had been locked, of course, because Israel didn't want them to get out. They're increasingly being made visible. And it's sort of what you were talking about before about the erasure. It's like, no, this erasure will not happen, because there's so much out there that is continually emerging. So I would say, I find that when we do engage in a process like this, where people, I'm not talking about those who are just like, there are fascists who don't want to, they don't want to learn. They're out to you can't reason with them, but there's a lot of people who I think are challenging themselves and struggling. And I think we have a real opportunity. And again, I feel as somebody in the part of the Jewish community, that's part of my obligation. I think I want to be a principled partner with the Palestinian-led movement. And I also want to do the hard work within my community. And so I do see an opening right now, quite honestly.
We're speaking with Donna Nevel and George Bisharat in regards to Israel-Palestine and how we come to some type of a solution. Guys, I want to address, obviously, Netanyahu, and I think that a lot of people were really honed in on this idea that he's the main cause of this problem, and now that he's gone, I think a lot of people are going to be going back to sleep. But I would make the argument that Bennett is likely to be even worse, because I think there's a little bit more of this lack of attention being paid to the issue right now. And of course, Gaza is already being bombed again. So it didn't take very long for them to negate on their promise not to do it. So I'm curious as to, how you view Bennett and, where ultimately this diplomatic approach is going to go, and how we, keep our eye on the prize of making sure that we don't let up on what's going on over there.
Well, Bennett has said things, openly racist things. He's boasted about the number of Arabs he's killed. He's spoken openly about annexing large parts of the West Bank. He has openly declared opposition to the two-state solution. And so, that might lead you to expect that he will be worse indeed than Netanyahu. There is the reality of his political coalition that is extremely fragile, and that might mitigate things to some extent. It might inhibit his freedom of action to some extent. But as you note correctly, the bombing is continuing, and of course, quite apart from these incidents of very obvious military violence, there is the daily violence that Palestinians experience in all areas under Israeli rule, whether in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, or even within Israel itself. There have been close to 2,000 people arrested, citizens of Israel. More than 90% of them have been Palestinians. That is since May of this year. And they have been beaten and tortured in custody. 26 people were killed, 26 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank in the month of May, and 2 young Palestinian boys, 15 years of age, have just been killed in the last week. So, the daily grind and low-level violence that Palestinians experience is continuing without any break whatsoever. But I do want to say one other thing, and that is that I think the fixation on Netanyahu as a personality was maybe somewhat like our fixation on Trump as a personality in the United States. And that led away from focus on the forces that produced both of those characters. And I think, the right word, and this is important because I think it bears on the question of where we go from here. There is a long-term rightward shift in Israel, of which Netanyahu and Bennett both are reflections or symptoms, not causes. And that has been going on since the late 70s. As you may know, Israel in its early years had sort of socialist or at least social democratic pretensions. That's gone. It's a thoroughly neoliberal state. It's a racist, openly, the politics of the state are openly racist. The society is racist. You saw the young men marching through the city in the March of Jerusalem shouting, "Death to Arabs, the second Nakba is coming, your village will burn," all of that kind of stuff. And these are not, they may be the most extreme, but they're not really far out of the spectrum. There were people who were elected to the Knesset in the prior elections who represented that faction exactly. So this rightward trend is a long-term thing. There are reasons for it that I can, I have some ideas. I don't think I have a complete explanation for it. But the important thing is that the idea that a left government is going to return and that we're going to be able to achieve a two-state solution because some Israeli leader will come to his senses, that's not going to happen. That just is not in the cards. And I think we have to think differently about where we go forward from here.
So what is, I mean, I always was sort of under the impression of, yes, I'll support a two-state solution. And now, of course, I realize that that's just not something I think that can, I don't know. I have mixed thoughts on whether or not that's something that can exist and still maintain what we would consider to be a democratic place. I don't see how you can have something that's an ethnostate at all be a democratic place because by definition, you're an apartheid state. So I don't know. So what I hear I don't know. So what, Donna, let me ask you, what do you think? What would be the best way to go from here? I mean, obviously we can't go back to 1948. But where do you go from here? How do we, even do anything for this?
Well, I mean, one thing is I think there's a global movement for justice. I think the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions that grew out of Palestinian civil society and is now literally a global movement, is a very important part of what's going to ultimately lead to justice. And it's, of course, part of that is the Palestinians' right to return, the right of return to their homes and their land, equal rights for Palestinians within Israel. I mean, it's a call. When you really look at the call for boycott and divestment and sanctions, it's a beautiful call for justice. And it's a call until, it's not a call forever. It's a call until Israel complies with basic principles of international law and human rights. And the pressure will keep being applied. Also, there's so much. I mean, we look at of course, the organizing going on in Palestine and among Palestinians across the globe. And as much as Israel tries to divide up Palestinians amongst themselves, you see the coming together in such powerful ways. And I think that, I think it's going to be from people's movements, from global movements, and it's going to keep moving and moving because it's not happening within Israeli society as has been described. And so I think that the more that we, when you talk about equal rights for all, I mean, I just read today and it really struck me. Someone said, can you imagine saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free? Which, think about that. It's a beautiful statement. It's for equal rights for all, for justice, is getting an outcry from
it's anti-Semitic. That's an anti-Semitic statement. You're wanting to annihilate the state of Israel.
And yet, if you really think about what it says, and on the other hand, Jewish Israelis yelling death to the Arabs doesn't even get the same response. So, that's already, it shows that I think that the work of all of us across the globe, in partnership with the Palestinian-led resistance movement, and to really make clear that boycott, divestment, and sanctions is a very important call that we should all be adhering to in whatever way we can.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Donna Nevel and George Bisharat. I am curious because obviously BDS is probably the line that a lot of moderates who are open to change feel that is not the line that they're willing to cross. Can you talk about the possibility of unintended consequences? Now, obviously, we saw that BDS is ultimately what broke, the apartheid in South Africa. I'm curious as to how you feel there may be unintended consequences if there was a full-on attempt to push a BDS movement. That seems to be the greatest pushback that I see, not from the Orthodox community. They're not going to be in favor of anything that changes anything. I'm talking about the people who are open to the idea of change, but they feel that BDS may be a bridge too far.
Well, so let me be clear. I don't think that BDS, first of all, BDS is a tactic, right? It is not a strategic end. And it seeks certain ends. It seeks, equal rights for Palestinian citizens of Israel into occupation and right of return. Those are the three basic demands of the BDS movement. I actually think that the BDS movement needs to take the next step and actually define what its end goal is, because I think part of the fear and suspicion surrounding it is that it harbors annihilationist intentions, and it doesn't. What I really think is called for at this particular time is something like a freedom charter, like the ANC issued for South Africa, in which it specifies, clearly what what the future is going to look like. And I think that future has to be a political arrangement which is based on justice and equal rights for everybody. And I happen to believe, for various reasons which I could explain, that the best framework for doing that is within one single state. I don't believe you can. I mean, we've been wrestling with the idea of partition of Palestine since 1937, when the Peel Commission issued a report that was the first recommendation of dividing the country. We've been, trying this game for 84 years unsuccessfly, right? And so there isn't going to be there never will be a partition of Palestine or Israel-Palestine that will be satisfactory and that will be accepted by everybody. And moreover, I would say, the objective of two states is itself not a morally compelling one. I think one of the reasons that the two-state solution has been unsuccessful is because nobody really wants it. You've got almost 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel who, if they remained in a Jewish state, would remain second-class citizens. It would be as if we said, okay, let's stop slavery in 2 out of the 11 Confederate states. How's that? We'll let the slaves be free in 2 out of the 11 Confederate states. Well, if the idea is of having an ethnic state for one people in a country that's mixed, it's illegitimate everywhere, not just, So, and I guarantee you that 700,000 Jewish settlers on the West Bank are never going to be moved. You tell me the political power that is ever going to be capable of moving them. And if they're not moved, there's no Palestinian state. Okay? What has happened within Israel in May of this year and earlier, back in 2008, after the withdrawal of Jewish settlers from the Gaza Strip, there are only 8,500 of them, right? They managed to move them and relocate them. Some of them relocated in cities within Israel with large Arab concentrations, with the specific aim of basically Judaizing those places, like Akka. And we had what Israeli officials called in 2008 pogroms against Arabs. And part of what was going on this last May was a response of Palestinians within Israel to displacement, just like what everybody saw going on in Sheikh Jarrah, what was going on in Lod, what was going on in Jaffa, what was going on in Akka and Haifa, all those places, same kind of thing. So, I think, and I'll just stop with this, I think one of the unacknowledged functions of settlement for Israel is actually diffusing social tensions within the Jewish population of Israel. It has mitigated class tensions by providing relatively cheap housing for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it, and it has separated the libertine, Tel Aviv from the conservative parts of the country and in the West Bank and the settlements, where the religious nationalists are mostly concentrated. And I guarantee you, they're never going to be brought back together. If there would be civil war within Israel itself between Jews, not just against Palestinians.
Speaking.
I was gonna. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, please.
No, please go.
No, I was. There were just two things I was thinking about when George was talking. One was that there's an Israeli organization called Zochrot, means remembering, and it and a Palestinian organization, Badil, They have come together and they've done a lot of work on looking at the practicalities of return and to show how very possible it is. And the other thing, when in your question about BDS, what I was thinking about is that, again, for those of us who are trying to, really act with integrity on this issue, it's real. If you really understand the right of return, and it's hard to then make some of the arguments that people make. If you really understand that history, when I first got involved with this issue, I mean, I'm now in my mid 60s. When I was, in my early 20s, I entered in 1967. So I was against the occupation of 1967, but I didn't yet understand what had happened in leading up to 48. Once you know that history, I think that and part of the reason I think it's so important to know that history is the right of return becomes much more understood. And I think, so to me, I just wanted to say that I think that's part of our work too, is to actually get to the roots and get to that foundation. And I think then you're having a very different kind of conversation when some of these questions come up, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think back to like my dad and even my grandmother, and this idea that if we allowed all the Arabs to come there, and then there would cease to be a Jewish state, and then they would kill all the Jews. And it's like this very fear-mongery, like you said, propagandized campaign that I grew up in North Miami Beach, which is the second largest Jewish ghetto in this country outside of Brooklyn. So there was no two sides of this story at all. So, for me, it's just we have a very older population here. Well, Donna, you're fairly local.
But it's changed. I grew up here and then I left for 35 years and lived in Manhattan. And now I'm back and I can say, look, we just had the protests have been thousands of people in support of Palestine on the streets of Miami.
It definitely has changed.
Yeah.
We are speaking with Donna Nevel and George Bisharat in regards to Israel-Palestine. I think the biggest impediment to real change is I'm not even going to say the Christian right, it's the evangelical right, if we're really being specific about it. And I think that those are the two biggest factions, if you will, that are driving are basically.
There's a bigger one than AIPAC, isn't there? What's the other one, George or Donna? Do you guys know? I just recently read something that there's actually a bigger PAC that gives more money, same concept as AIPAC, that's taken over.
Yeah, the thing that we talk about on the show in regards to something as local as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, or on the national level in terms of why we have such a rudderless ship when it comes to any type of reasonable legislation for working class families in this country is corporate special interests. And I believe that corporate special interests as it relates to Israel-Palestine is a big deal. Now, of course, we alluded to obviously AIPAC and the evangelical right. And if there is another organization, if you can speak to that, and if that is in fact the biggest impediment to actual systemic change, please share.
Yeah, I think the organization you're probably thinking of is Christians United for Israel, or KUFI, which has a very large following. I'm not exactly sure about their expenditures on political campaigns, but they do represent a lot of voters. I think the evangelicals bring electoral weight, to this game, and they're a very significant force. And a very big problem, because it's very hard to reason with their views on Israel-Palestine, which is, Jews need to be concentrated in Israel in order to bring about the second coming of Christ. And when he does, then, Jews and anybody else living there will be offered the opportunity to convert to Christianity or die. That's, that is the future.
That's reasonable.
Yeah,
that's very reasonable.
It's just so ridiculous.
So that's a tough problem. Although I have recently been reading that even within the evangelical community, especially younger people, are far less sold on this whole deal with Israel than their elders. To address the corporate interests, they're very significant as well. They're kind of the sleeping giant, I think, underlying a lot of this, whether it's high tech or the arms industry, especially. there's a lot of profit. You know, that $3.8 billion that that we provide to Israel on an annual basis, there's a significant part of it that is spent at Lockheed and Boeing and General Dynamics and Raytheon, and so yeah, those those interests don't necessarily take the lead. They're not all that publicly visible, but believe me, when their interests are jeopardized, they move, and and they're powerful. So it's something that has to be contended with. Now, there were powerful corporate interests that supported U.S. support for apartheid.
Yep.
So we in South Africa, that is. So we have to realize that we don't have to solve every problem and overcome every interest group in order to make this situation better and even achieve substantial justice. I think it can be done, and I think we have a kind of momentum, kind of a tailwind that we haven't had for a long time in this country, and it's coming from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and it's coming from the Black community and other communities of color, and it's coming from young people. And so, there is a whole lot of work to be done. I've seen situations, I've seen openings like this, like Donna, I've been around for a while and engaged in this issue for a long time. And I've seen promising situations that wither, and don't come to fruition. So I take absolutely nothing for granted, but I also feel more optimism at this time than I have in a very long time.
Yeah.
With that said, I do think that there are a couple of other mitigating issues that we must address, and this is one that I do think has validity. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, and I do think that one of the reasons that has been happening is because of this relentless attack by the Israeli government on the Palestinians, and it is boomeranging back towards the Jewish communities in this country. We've seen it in Manhattan. I haven't really seen it down here. We've seen it in Los Angeles. I do think that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And what is the right way to go about it? Because as Jen, as you said many times, there really must be a distinction between American Jews and Israelis. And I think a lot of people...
there's a big distinction between Judaism and Zionism. Those are completely unrelated things.
So
they're unrelated. But I do think that Peter's right, that the Israel's behavior and the constant linking of Zionism to anti-Semitism has now made it where there's legitimate anti-Semitism based on the actions of the state of Israel. And I think that we are seeing backlash from that. I do. And I think that it's a big problem.
Well, Donna, I don't want to monopolize.
Okay, go ahead, and I'll speak after you.
Yeah. Okay, so anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism is a reality, and one that must be taken very seriously. It is, however, primarily a phenomenon of the white nationalist movement in this country. There's very little of it that comes from supporters of Palestinian rights. And I will say, the allegations of anti-Semitism are frequently simply bogus. I've got to tell you, bogus. I've experienced it myself, where I was quoted for a talk that I gave. I did not say what they claimed I said, and what they claimed I said was anti-Semitic. It was a simple, outright lie. That incident in Los Angeles that you were referring to, I think the demonstrators who were driving by a restaurant and were claimed to have attacked Jews who were sitting there. I've looked at studies of what actually happened. What appears to actually have happened was that some young men who were sitting in the restaurant got into it over politics, not over their Jewish identity or anything else. And it was essentially a conflict over politics, not an anti-Semitic attack as such. So, there's definitely a problem with anti-Semitism. We saw it in Charlottesville. We've seen it since. you know, in Pittsburgh, it's a reality, and it's ugly, and it's got to be faced and dealt with. But it is not a function of, you know, of the pro-Palestinian movement and the pro-justice movement in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say your last line, I think, is really true, and I think it's a very pernicious attempt. You know, again, it's a propaganda attempt to smear the Palestinian liberation movement unjustly. I also think a lot of times when people are quoting about anti-Semitism, they're using statistics from the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, which is I'm part of a campaign that many of our groups are part of, called Drop the ADL, because they are an organization that has a history from its inception. It's not just that they've changed, of targeting communities of color, of targeting Palestinians and Muslims, of targeting activists and activist groups, of infiltrating groups. And it is a fact that they link when you look at their incidents of anti-Semitism, criticism of Israel is included in their list. So I think it's very important that we're able to separate real anti-Semitism when it occurs from this relentless attempt and attack by Zionist organizations and the Israeli government to conflate, to accuse supporters of Palestinian justice with anti-Semitism. And as I said, this is a long, long history. If you all remember the Goldstone report with Justice Goldstone, I mean, when he was part of the report on what happened in Gaza and laid out the atrocities that were going on in Gaza, and the accusations against him were, they never ended. And to say that, Palestinians, of course, and Black activists have seen the largest brunt of this, but it's also, those of us who speak out for justice for Palestinians. And, just to mention something in Florida, well, of course, we know there's an IHRA definition, the IHRA definition that's been of anti-Semitism that has as examples criticism of Israel, the anti-Semitism that's going around. And in the state of Florida, we have an anti-Semitism bill that's based on that definition. So it's really an attempt now to criminalize, to control, to thwart, and as as many people will say who've been on the receiving end of this, it destroys your career, it can destroy your career, it can destroy your livelihood, and they really attempt to destroy your soul. The other thing we see a lot, I mean, there are now 30 states in this country that have anti-BDS legislation on the books. And this is something that's outrageous. And for the most part, those laws slip through with very little acknowledgement or fanfare. They just sort of slip them in. Most people have no idea that these laws even exist. And then you go to apply for, let's say, to be a contractor, an audiologist for a public school in Texas, and you have to sign away your right to your First Amendment rights in order to, be loyal to the state of Israel. And that is something that's happened. And Florida is, of course, one of those 30 states that has anti-BDS legislation on the books. But yeah, people don't even realize that. And that's a real to me. Now we're getting into like my civil liberties. I don't care what your opinion may or may not be about Israel, but the fact that there could be an impediment to how we use our money and how we, speak our voice it's an outrage.
Agreed.
As simple as that may sound, I do think that the best way to wind down the conversation is to talk about solutions or a solution, something that does make sense, because this is, I would say, probably the most complicated political issue we do have, because there is no clear-cut issue
solution,
or solution that would be reasonable, because this is something that not only are a lot of people juxtaposed to, a lot of people are willing to die for this issue. And that's a very serious, it's a very tough nut to crack. But like you suggested, George, and I think it's absolutely true, there are a lot of cracks in the armor, and it's not working like it used to. A lot of things in this country are not working like it used to. I think a lot of people are recognizing that, Trump, while a major problem, was not the problem. He was merely a symptom of a systemic problem that we have in our politics.
Yeah.
And I think just as much as people recognize that there are many issues that exist in Israel, there must be a reckoning for what they have done to the Palestinian people. And how we rectify that is the question of the day. How do we solve this major crisis? Because again, there is no silver bullet. There are certain issues that are in this country that I think have silver bullets. Universal health care, ending qualified immunity.
Right. There's things
there are things we could do that would really, reparations in communities of color. There are things that you can do that would systemically change things. But I do think the Israel-Palestine issue is one that doesn't have a clear-cut answer. What do you guys suggest would be the most sensible way to try to
How's
build
the
this
transition?
bridge?
Well, yeah, where's the transition? What does that look like?
Oh, Donna, do you want to go?
No, it's okay. I'll wait.
Okay, all right. So actually, I think the situation is far simpler than is often portrayed. What's going on? I mean, I could summarize in one sentence what's going on, and that is that Israel is waging a colonial war against the Palestinian people and displacing them in favor of Jewish settlers. That's what started in the late 19th century, and that's when Zionist colonies were first established in Palestine. That's what's been going on ever since. We've had several major convulsions in the wars of 48 and 67 in which huge numbers of Palestinians were displaced, but they have always been displaced before, after, and up to the present time. That's why Palestinians, and Donna correctly cited this, that we refer to it as the ongoing or continuing Nakba. That means catastrophe in Arabic. The Nakba, in the sense of the forced displacement of the Palestinians, has never stopped. The solution to it is actually quite simple. Stop the Nakba, end the Nakba, and reverse its consequences to the greatest extent possible. And I mean, my personal opinion, I've already expressed it, is that the best framework in which to do this is within a single state. We actually have functioned with a single state since 1967, in which only Israel enjoys true sovereignty and only Jews enjoy the privileges of real citizenship. Everybody else there is second-class citizen or worse, and it's, equal rights and democracy, one person, one vote within a single state. Will that mean the end of a Jewish state in Israel? Yes, actually, it will. You can't have a state for one people in another people's country. You simply cannot have that. Both peoples, I would add, however, are going to be sacrificing what they might prefer, which is to have exclusive sovereignty. So that loss is reciprocal or symmetrical. But when you live in the same spot, you just have to share it. I do believe that the people who live there today, both Jews, Christians, and Muslims, are capable of living peacefully together, prosperously, and truly could become a model, a catalyst for democratic and progressive change throughout that entire blighted region. If we let it, and if we put our hearts and minds behind it. I do think, like I said earlier, the two-state solution has failed in part because nobody really is happy with it. A solution in which everybody has equal rights, in which there is true democracy, is an inspiring vision that can bring out heroism and courage and change in people like nothing we've seen in the past.
I agree. I think that's great. it's been a very long road for me to get to where I can say, okay, I'm okay with the idea of there not being a Jewish state. Like, that's a hard thing. And I'm probably going to get a lot of crap for this. This is definitely going to be the hot take. But yeah, I cannot support an ethnostate. It doesn't work. And it's unfortunate, but I do think there is a way to do it. And I do think there's a way to transition, keeping people safe. And certainly if any country has the wherewithal of security and technology, it's Israel. So if anybody is capable of reinforcing safety, because that's a big fear. People here actually have this idea that if you were just to open up the gates of Gaza, that they're all going to come running in and killing all the Jews. Like, that's it. And then at least they're going to have citizenship that we're going to have to share our rights with them. Like, they can't even fathom this.
Of course, if anybody has the right to be fearful, it's the fact that, the Israeli government has been indiscriminately killing Palestinians. So I think we have to make sure when we're talking about safety, a state that has equal rights for all, nothing could be safer than to have all people living in dignity with equal rights. So I think that if we're talking about, safety and security, we really want to remember, one, who's been endangered, and two, how the model that's being called for is a model that's not exclusive. It's an inclusive model, in fact. So yeah, I think that's something really important. I think we have to think a lot about reframing when some of these things come up, to really say, well, let's take a minute and see, what are we really talking about, and who's been unsafe, and who's been. So yeah, I think that I just wanted to add it, as if it's okay before we end, since we are in Florida. Jen, you're still in Florida, right?
I'm in Dayton. Yeah, I'm in Dayton.
Yeah. Because I just wanted to say that, just in terms of action, that the home of Duty Free Americas is in South Florida, and the owners of Duty Free Americas, the Falak family, are major contributors to settlement building in Israel and to the violent displacement of Palestinians from their home and land. And AP has come out with really showing kind of how much of their money is going to settler groups and to funding violence. So all of our social justice groups who committed to justice in Palestine have come together, and we are beginning to launch a major campaign.
Or wait. Are you talking about the duty-free
Americas that are in our airports?
No. Oh, okay. You're not talking. Okay, but the headquarters is the building is on Hollywood Boulevard.
Right. And we actually did an action there 2 weeks ago, telling them to stop funding apartheid, stop funding ethnic cleansing, and we will be continuing to organize, because they are in airports across the country, and they are very big funders of.
Wait, I also want one more thing. Just in all fairness, my husband's a urologist, and his Hollywood office is in that Duty Free Americas building on the first floor. And I just want to put the disclaimer that my husband's urology practice is not a supporter of settlements or any sort of construction in the West Bank, but they do in fact work in that Duty Free America building. But no, they're just renters. They
explained to us they own the whole building, and then they rent it out to medical offices.
And I assure you, my husband is probably no clue about any of this. But my point is, let's not hate on everybody in the building. That was my point.
Kind of like finding out that the Koch brothers own Bounty.
It's like
you just don't.
I just want to say, it's not the whole building is in Duty Free America.
Yes, it's
be kind to your friendly neighborhood urologist.
Well, I think it speaks to that issue of the oligarchic construction of our society today, and how it's very difficult, and how religion is used as a weapon more than an asset. And that is why we have to continue having these conversations. It is essential, because not talking about it is how this has festered for far too long. Now that this has become a mainstream talking point, we are more or less forced to talk about it. And when you're forced to talk about it, you kind of don't have a choice but to try to find a solution, because it's not going to go away. And that's what we're doing. Donna, George,
thank you so
much for coming on this evening. Guys, please check out their work, and we will definitely continue this conversation going forward.
And George, I'll see you at the next board meeting.
Yes.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great evening.
All right. Be well.
You too. And so obviously what we are faced with here is an issue that doesn't have a clear-cut solution. And the one thing I didn't want to get down into the weeds with, which I think is what could ultimately end up happening here, is this idea of there is no clear-cut solution because religion it's been around for millennia.
And you're talking about people. When people are dealing strictly in faith-based thinking and they're not dealing in reason and science, you're not going to be able to come to a compromise.
Because there
and a
is
solution.
no reason to religion.
Well,
it's
right.
not reasonable.
I mean,
it's
and that's
about
what
believing in something you can't feel or touch.
But
It's just
those people are being used by the corporates. See,
Yes.
that's the thing. See, the real reason that this is going on is colonialism, imperialism.
Well, you've even said that
subjugation.
Israel. This is why very often, anytime you see any type of oppressor that's taking place in Jerusalem, it's always the American flag and the Israeli flag side by side.
Well, look, we are imperial partners. They are essentially our arm in the Middle East. And, you know, when I think about how it's used, it's like no other. Essentially, the religion is used to corral the people. That's how it's always been done.
Correct.
But the real reason that it is what it is way more to do with the military industrial complex, the fossil fuel industry, and all of other colonialism aspects. That is infinitely more why that really things happen. The people that are really in charge use the evangelical Christians in order to sort of build up their side of things.
It's the mask. It's what they always use.
The people in charge really couldn't care less about
I didn't want to
religion.
get I didn't want to get too hard, but I thought that I thought that George in particular was incorrect about anti-Semitism. It's absolutely it's elevated. There's no question that it is, but it's not because of this idea that there isn't a cause and effect.
No, he's saying all he was saying is that it's not based on the pro-Palestinian movement.
I do not agree with that.
I don't know. I really don't know what to
think
make of
that there's, and again, like I said, I'm not going to get into the minutia about whether or not. Now, I will say this: do I think that that is the majority of where people's heads are at in the pro-Palestine movement? Absolutely not.
Right.
But as is always the case in politics, it's always the outlier. As Ronald Reagan said, it's the welfare queen. So you pick one person out of millions and say, see, that's how everybody is, but it's not true. What you're going to do is always look for the negative side. You're going to look for, who is actually causing this lack of progress. And I think that that is a great transition into news and amuse.
Okay, wait, because speaking of lack of progress.
If there is a queen
of lack of progress.
And of course, our good friend of the show, former President Bill Clinton, is going to have to come in and talk about this because Lord knows he's got a lot to say.
So for people who aren't aware, Hillary Clinton reared her ugly head yet again. She always comes out when she sees an opportunity, hi girl, to stick it to anybody affiliated with Bernie. So Hillary Clinton came out and endorsed Shontel Brown in the Ohio race where Nina Turner's running. And yes, thanks to Hillary, Nina had her best fundraising day ever. So it was very helpful. Thank you, HRC. You can always help the other side. Same thing happened with Jamal and Elliot Engel. Best fundraising day ever when she endorsed Elliot Engel. So anyway, thank you for that. Thank your wife for that.
I keep telling her to stay out of this business of politics. She's just not that good at it. And she's been riding her coattails on my name for far too long. And look what happens. Hillary, I told you, stay out of the process. You're not helping, you're hurting.
No, she's helping us. She's helping us.
Yeah, but I don't want her to help you.
No, I know.
I appreciate you trying to change things, but I've benefited quite a bit from neoliberalism. I mean, kind of decided.
Well, okay, so and also recently is about her going back on her Russiagating, constant harping on Putin and Russiagating. Like she just won't go away.
The problem is that Putin never liked her. I mean, we met him back in the late 90s, and she was trying to act like she was president, and he didn't really like that very much. And so he kind of made a quip to her and suggested that I can't really talk Russian, but I'd never be president. And she didn't like that. She was really offended by it. And so I tried to tell her to calm down and, make your own way and not worry so much about what this Putin guy has to say or what anybody else has to say. Quite frankly, everybody who has something to say doesn't really have anything good to say. And, that's just kind of how it is with Hillary.
All right, but you need to come back and talk about this article about Putin and Biden and whatever it is.
I think Nina Turner's a nice lady. I don't really have a problem with her. I mean,
this.
you want to talk about Biden?
Well, I don't.
Well, I don't really like talking about Hillary very much, but I don't think we really have a choice because, again, she still thinks that she's going to be president somehow. I really don't know how she's convinced herself of that, but she's going to keep trying to act like, hey, look at me, I'm I'm as big a warmonger as you could ever hope for. I'm a bigger warmonger than Joe Biden, and so why don't you make me president?
So what is this disaster she thinks that Biden must clean up?
Oh, making sure that she wasn't president. She has to blame somebody. She can't blame herself.
Well, okay, well,
I
that's
keep
true.
telling Hillary, if you really want to know why you're not president, just look right in the mirror. She gets really upset when I say
All right,
that. But,
go.
I've tried to make it so that she understands why it isn't really good for her to do that. And again, she gets involved in these really bad spots where she thinks that her influence actually means something. I think she's trying to find out, or is going to find out, that it doesn't actually.
No, it does. It meant something really good to Nina Turner.
Well,
I thank you, Hillary, for that, because Nina had her best fundraising day, and that was awesome.
All I can say is, if you ever decide to run for office again, you better hope that Hillary endorses Debbie.
Oh, I hope Hillary
does.
I hope she endorses Debbie.
That's the worst thing that could happen to us. I mean, and like I said, we've been kind of cruising under the radar for a while, and I've been able to slip through the cracks when it comes to the whole Epstein story and whatnot. And,
I don't know how.
She just doesn't want to stay out of the spotlight.
No, she can't help herself.
And that's why I told her, I said, Hillary, I've got enough eyeballs on me. I got the FBI looking into my business and that stuff, and I really don't need you talking to the press, because that just makes things difficult for me. And I got to go into hiding. I got to go to my private island, and I don't like getting away for that long. Got to keep things under wraps. But nonetheless, I hope you guys are doing good. And
all right, go.
It's really unfortunate that Hillary just can't stay away. But if she ain't staying away, then neither am I. And I know you guys love seeing me, so it's all good, right, Jen?
No.
I'll see you later.
Because I really have not been paying attention to the summit. So I haven't been paying attention at all to Hillary, the whole Biden thing.
If there's anybody who is the epitome of impeding progress, it's Hillary Clinton. And so the idea that she decided, of all, again, everyone would say, well, if she had like a slate of candidates that she was endorsing and, this is who she wanted to address. Okay, fine. But that's not the case here. She decided to basically pick out the person who, without question, is the heir apparent to Bernie's movement.
And just like she rears her head when it has anything to do with people, honestly, that are standout progressives, because she did the same thing with Ellie Dangle and Jamal Bowman.
The big difference between her and Obama is that Obama actually still has pull. She doesn't have any pull. In fact, it's working in the opposite effect of what her intention is. And so by her all of a sudden deciding, I've got to endorse a candidate who's over 30 points behind the person who is leading this race. What does she end up doing? Probably increased, Nina's lead by 5 to 10 points.
Good.
And gave her $100,000 in additional campaign money, the single best day that they've had on the campaign. I mean, if that's not an indication of just how toxic Hillary Clinton is, that's about as good as it gets. So keep endorsing, please, by all means. Just make sure you're endorsing the people who line up with your values, because your values suck and very few people share them. And so, of course, it has the opposite effect. And I get you. I bet you Chantel Brown, she probably approached her and was like, hey, you want me to endorse your? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure she was.
Wonderful.
Good luck. Good riddance.
Unintended consequences, Mrs. Brown. And Nina Turner, who is the best of us when it comes to politics in this country, it couldn't be more clear. Nina's what we should aspire to be, and Hillary is the complete opposite.
All right, can we get off of Hillary?
We certainly can.
I know I don't want to be anywhere near her.
And as we talk about news and we talk about what is most important and how we should be focusing not on the gossip side of things, but on the policy side of things. If you want a good reason to address why we need a Green New Deal, a complete overhaul of our energy grid in this country, look no further as to what's happening in Texas right now.
Well, they are, after what happened last year, and we all learned that the Texas independent grid system was not able to really accommodate it. They're asking residents to take it easy and stop using as much air conditioning and just stop, really take it easy on the system, because they're scared of failures.
You know what I heard that they had to set they asked them, Governor Abbott asked them to set the thermostat at 82 degrees. It's amazing. I mean, that's hot.
Well, it is. And you know what? They're going to, most likely, I see them ending up in the same boat that they are in, because they haven't done anything different to change the infrastructure. So they're not going to be in a different...
And that's really the question. I mean, listen, you know what? We don't have any love, for for Beto. But as far as I'm concerned, if he's the best shot you've got to knock off Abbott, you kind of have to go for it. I mean, he's got the name recognition, and I look at it as
He's
sort of
just
like
such a goofball.
he is, and
He's
that's like I don't
he's
think
like Jughead.
I don't think people take him seriously
because
and that's
he's
the
not
problem.
serious.
He
does not come off serious.
Well, just so you guys know, in I think about a week, we are actually going to have two really solid former candidates for Congress, Julie Oliver and Mike Siegel, who were part of BNC with Jen, who are in Texas, who ran for Congress and are now starting this grassroots organization to really, build the bench, so to speak, which is what you need to do. You need to build a non-corporate grassroots bench on the Democratic side if you actually want to see that change.
You're digressing.
I'm digressing because this is where you have this problem. Governor Abbott and the Texas GOP are not going to do anything to mitigate this problem.
And it just also coincided with U.S. Is likely to have the hottest place on Earth, which is obviously Death Valley.
122 degrees, I think, in Phoenix today.
Yeah.
It's but it's a dry heat. So
God, let me tell you something.
Changes
Phoenix,
everything.
It's a dry heat.
Nevertheless,
okay.
It's just another clear-cut example about how we need to change our grid, which will reduce our carbon footprint, which will deal with the uncompromising.
Now, Texas does have that additional problem of that they're independent and they didn't want to be part of the national system. And so as a result, they were kind of left high and dry or soaking wet when they had the storms, and they were not able to maintain.
And this is why you have to, and Greg is correct. And this is why you have to address this thing head on. There is a serious problem when it comes to, having that balance. And again, I think this is one of the biggest problems we do have in politics. We unfortunately are dealing with a very serious problem with gerrymandering, with states being dominated by one party. Florida and Texas are dominated by the GOP. California and New York are dominated by the Democrats.
And yet they all seem like...
And they never get anything done that's good. Both sides.
Yeah, it's just wrong.
New York, maybe on the margins.
Well, they're certainly better than we are in terms of stuff.
And I still say that the only reason why New York is actually seeing a surge is because of the colossal victory of AOC over Joe Crowley, because it has inspired so many people.
Well, and now you have more people too.
Correct. You do. And you have you have sort of like this AOC faction, if you will, that has grown, whether it's through the Sunrise Movement, whether it's through DSA, whether it's through the Working Families Party, and they are going right after Cuomo. Remember, there was that, that Democratic group. I can't remember the exact name, but they're basically Republicans. Right. They block all progressive legislation. So you might as well be a GOP if that's what you're going to do. Nevertheless, that change is happening. It's simply not happening fast enough. Can Texas get there? I don't know, but it's certainly worth trying, because who the hell wants to stand for this? There's no point. You have to evolve.
Right.
And that is the thing about the Southern GOP in particular. There is no evolving. It's simply corporate, old school, and that's got to change. But with that said, our final...
Oh, and this was just something that I did sort of as a precursor. We keep talking about that we're going to be doing a Medicare for All virtual summit.
Yes.
I've stopped calling. It's not really a telethon. It's really a summit. We're going to have at least 3 panels. This is going to be on July 22nd for our live stream. I guess we'll do like 7 to 10 or 8 to 11. I don't know. Well, time to be determined. But one of those panels is going to be healthcare in the Black community. This is something that is a discrepancy that is not often addressed and needs to be.
That is definitely, and definitely one of the people I think we should have on that panel is Dr. Dooley, who was Bernie's primary Medicare for All advocate that was on the campaign trail. And she could definitely speak to the detriment within the Black community in particular. That is definitely somebody who, we definitely want to have. And it does look like, knock on wood, it does look like Marianne Williamson, who is going to be the master of ceremonies in Washington, D.C.,
will be one of our panelists.
She is going to be one of our panelists. So,
Yay,
we'll build it out. But this is, again, I am tired of watching people. We all are. We are tired of watching people just throw mud and bicker back and forth.
Yeah.
We need solutions.
So we're gonna do a summit. And so one of the things I wanted to point out, so in May, and this is why I did this, because I need to see it because I'm blind. In May, the AMA released a plan dedicated to embedding racial justice and advancing health equity. They were including it in their new, I don't know, I wouldn't call them bylaws. I don't know, whatever it is, the AMA.
Right.
And the new president coming in wants to do this. And of course, there has to be backlash, because a whole bunch of Southern doctors are acting out to this, like we're seeing with people in the school system with critical race theory. You've got all these white Southern doctors that are basically coming out and saying, well, I don't need to do anything special about that. And why do we need to incorporate that? And so I just think, to me, that is just absolutely outrageous that we're dealing with this in healthcare too. So I just thought I put this on as sort of like a precursor.
I mean, come on, you look at this doctor. I don't know what his name is, but
no, he's a good guy.
Oh, he is.
This is the new president. See, that's why he doesn't have devil horns. This is the new president.
Are you implying that Hillary is a devil?
I am. He actually is a white Southerner too. But this gentleman is the new president. And he actually, when he saw everybody coming out and challenging this thing, he just looked at them, because he and a few other people, I guess, on the board put this together. And he basically said, yeah, we're not debating this. And so he's just not even standing for any of that. He's like, yeah, they can all talk amongst themselves. We're doing this. So I don't know. So kudos to that white Southern doctor. But anyway.
If that's one good thing that you can mention. But of course, our night is going to conclude with a humorous approach to a couple of things.
Okay, so tonight, yet again, I bring you an episode in the Kente Cloth Tales, an anthology of tone deafness. Tonight's episode is, and here we go, and I actually have
something beautiful that came across the wire that I showed you.
Okay, well, we could talk about that, but this is tonight's Kente Cloth Tale. So I'm going to read this. Wait, you need to get rid of the thing, because it really looks good all together. Okay. So.
Oh, no, wrong one.
Once upon a time, there was a Congress that wanted to look like it cared about Black people in the country, but they didn't want to actually do anything to help the Black community. So they decided to make a national holiday of an important historical event that should already be ingrained in our culture, but isn't. And now we should sing their praises. The end. So that was today's Kente Cloth Tale. I hope you all enjoyed.
There's nothing wrong with making Juneteenth a federal holiday. The problem is that there's no solutions. There's no actual systemic change that is going to make people of color's lives better that need help.
But it's absurd. Hence why it is now in the Kente Cloth Tales anthology. Yes. Because yes, I have no problem with celebrating Juneteenth. I have no problem with that being a holiday. I'm for all holidays, to be honest with you. If you want to add a free day off, I'm taking it. So I don't really care one way or the other what you call it. But to act like this is some sort of tokenism of solution finding is absurd. And this is, but it's along the same lines as the people that believe, oh, we had a Black president, everything's fine now. We can't be a racist country. We had a Black president. Celebrating Juneteenth as a national holiday, first of all, if that's something that the Black community really wants to have, something that's a celebratory thing, and they want, have at it, man. I think it's great. I'm perfectly good. Put it on the calendar, pay them for the holiday. It's all good. But to act like this is something that we should be celebrating, that Congress did this, is, I'm sorry. We're still celebrating Columbus Day. So, the authenticity, your gestures are just really pathetic to me.
No, unfortunately, we have a history of, and the thing that I also think needs to be pointed out is the fact that this passed so unanimously. What that tells me more than anything else is that it clearly had no effect whatsoever on economics, and that's exactly why. At least economics for working class people.
But it's to say that, look, they love identity issues. They love doing that stuff. It makes them look good. It's the same as tearing down monuments and renaming things. And you know what? I have no problem with that. I'm not speaking at this from some sort of like white supremacist, don't change my stuff. Change it all up. Name everything after indigenous people. Name everything. I couldn't care less. But that's not solving any of our problems. So, yeah. And if you want to give everybody health care and jobs and a living wage, and you want to do that in housing, and then you want to fight about renaming Dixie Highway, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, give us actual. If the hill you want to die on
Dixie Highway.
is if the hill you want to die on is not actually fixing a problem, but basically dealing with your feelings about something.
Exactly.
That is a solution for you. That is not a solution for us.
Correct.
And we need to deal with solutions for us.
This is one of those things wherein I couldn't care less about people's feelings.
But you see,
your feelings are not my problem.
And again, this is one of the biggest problems with corporate media.
Yeah.
If we had a fair media in this country, when Pelosi and the rest of them took that knee with the freaking kente cloths. That should have been it. They should have been cut to pieces and people would have been calling them out. But remember.
Yet then if they didn't do that, we wouldn't have the kente cloth tails.
That is very true. But again, this is why if you've never seen Wolf Blitzer basically kind of like on his knees begging Pelosi to do something about the homeless crisis we have in this country.
She just could not.
She was like, how dare you?
She's
Do
like,
you understand who
like,
I am?
down,
And that I come
down.
on your show to make you look good. You're not doing me any favors. I mean, look, she's Marie Antoinette.
Go
There's
eat
just
some
no,
ice cream,
like,
Nancy.
really. I mean, of course, and then of course she does the thing with the ice cream. But like I said,
she is
Nancy
Antoinette.
Think whatever you want of Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy is 55 years old. Nancy Pelosi is 80. If that doesn't tell you that the GOP, for all its flaws, knows when it's time to evolve, and the Democrats don't, wait until you see what happens next year during the midterms. Because the only thing that is potentially going to save the Democrats is if they do manage to pass the PRO Act, and if the Republicans are simply shattered by the fact that Trump still runs the party. But that might not be enough because a lot of them are actually okay with that.
Wait till Trump comes out and supports the PRO Act.
Well, that would
be very interesting.
And you know what?
Do you want to get into
Wesley? Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Give this time?
We appreciate you adding to the algorithm because by you making a comment and saying that actually helps our channel.
It does.
So by all means, have at it. We really appreciate it.
But here's the thing. So there's a comment, Anthony, just so you know, this guy said, you are both frauds. But what I don't understand is what am I fraudulently trying to be? How dare you try to help people? No, but like, if I'm a fraud, then what am I really like? What am I doing? Okay, so do you want to do our closing, we're going to talk about
our closing topic of the night could not be any more of a laugh track. Because
we're talking about monumental change.
Yes.
This guy is proposing change that is going to just
really
change the world. It's going to change everything.
But last thing, before we get to it, I think is very important is we obviously want to one more time reiterate that
anybody who signs up tonight, you get the really cool Lulu generational change sticker for any $5 or $10 Patreons who sign up tonight. And we will be having our end of the month Zoom members only meeting on June 30th. I will be calling in from Asheville, and I'm going to have some interesting stuff. I'm going to be staying on a hemp farm, and so I'm staying in a camper on a hemp farm. Okay, but no. So what we need to talk about is this monumental piece of legislation that's coming out, courtesy of no one but Marco Rubio.
Well, who else could it possibly be?
And he's so generous, little Marco. So little Marco Rubio has decided that people who have that have survived terrorist attacks should have their student loans forgiven.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that now people who have survived if you have survived a terrorist attack, so terrorist attack survivors is now a protected class of people, apparently, that is worthy of having their student loans forgiven. I guess that's a bright side to surviving a terrorist attack. I know a lot of people that haven't that would like to have their student loans forgiven. But what's amazing about that, Marco, you turd, is that the president could just actually write an order and get rid of all student loan debt. And your stupid policy could then go right up your stupid self-ass.
And not only that, but let's face it, most people are starting to learn more, just the whole experience of dealing with COVID and understanding that modern monetary theory is a real thing, that we can actually afford to do these things. We have again, it's very simple. For anybody who doesn't understand what modern monetary theory is, it's very simple. There is a lot of details to it, but the most basic concept is that the federal government is a currency issuer, which means it cannot run out of money. It merely needs to control inflation. State and local governments are currency users. They have to balance a budget.
Correct.
That is the difference. So when somebody at the state level tells you that we can't afford it, well, that may be true, yes, but you need to also understand where the money's being prioritized. So, for example, in the state of Florida, Governor DeSantis likes to prioritize big business tax cuts. So how do you do that? Well, you create a sales tax for working class people. So we get screwed to help rich people. It's really, really good. And so,
what is this about, though?
oh, I don't know.
No, but I'm really just curious because that's so fascinating.
Well, because it's somebody who's probably pro-Israel and thinks that we're nut jobs for talking about, I'm surprised we didn't get, why are you putting that up there?
Because you put it up the first time, but I'm trying to read it. You are withholding free health healing of ill children. All right, I don't know what that is.
We've got crazy people who come on the show.
All right,
That's
go
okay.
away. We already have a troll. Thank you, Wesley. We're not accepting troll applications.
No, listen, Declan, you have competition here. You have to deal with
Wesley,
him.
we're not accepting new troll
Declan
applications
is our
right now.
first
We'll get back
and
with
our
you
only.
when we are.
He's our person.
Where is
You're
he?
You're in
He said
competition.
Declan's already here tonight. There he is.
Yeah, Declan, no violence tonight.
All right,
Declan,
no violence.
We're expecting you to step up, baby. We can't allow you to lose your perch because this guy's pretty good.
Declan, you got to
He's
take
got
down
a
the
lot
new
of
troll,
wonderful things
man.
to say.
We got a new troll.
But, this also speaks to a more interesting issue about Rubio and the fact that he's even attempting to try to do something. But what I think that also speaks to is the fact that his hands are so tied by corporate interests that he really has no maneuverability.
I think it's
whatsoever.
that, and also him pandering to his red, white, and blue patriotic base that loves the idea of going after the terrorists and capturing all the brown people. I think it's inflammatory language. I think he purposefully does that to highlight it, because how many people does this apply to? How many people that are survivors of terrorist attacks would have their student loans forgiven? Like, how many people does this apply? This is not a group of people. That's a ridiculous statement. It is virtue signaling.
Well, it is virtue signaling, and it doesn't actually apply to something that you can touch.
It's the most ridiculous thing.
How many student loan debt people are we talking about that actually were victims of a terrorist attack?
That's what I just said.
But that's the point. It's like, where do you come up with something like this?
The asshole of Marco Rubio.
He's certainly got he's got a big mouth. I don't know about his butt. I'm not going to think about that. But I think this is more to the fact that he is just, again, he's so not GOP from the standpoint of he doesn't have the spine to, I guess what you would say, kick ass and take names. He really is
he's such a little snivelly, whiny
weasel. He's a weasel.
He's a weasel.
And he's just
but yet he's not as bad as, like, say, Ted Cruz.
No, Ted Cruz is the ultimate weasel. But it's just amazing how in the state of Florida, we complain so much about how bad politics are here. It is amazing how juxtaposed Rubio is to DeSantis. They are so different. DeSantis is one of those guys who doesn't ask any questions, doesn't care, just does it and goes about his business, and he doesn't care how many people he pisses off. Whereas Rubio is like the complete opposite of that. He's so mealy-mouthed.
They represent both of those factions of the Republican Party.
Maybe that is the intention. Maybe the intention is to actually have, that whole idea of, when it's all said and done, we are going to bring in the entire faction. And so the one thing that the GOP does tend to do is vote in lockstep. Well, here are the two GOP candidates. DeSantis appeals to one side of the party. Rubio's appealing to the other side of the party. And as long as they hold that line, that's what's going to win the day next year. Now, as far as the Democrats are concerned, I think we both agree, and we love Alan Ellison. And I think that he deserves a fair shot to become the nominee. But they're going to put all their weight behind Val
of course
Demings.
they are.
That is a big mistake, because the person that is drawing the most ire from the Democratic base is Ron DeSantis. If you try to go after Rubio as sort of like that lead, you will lose. Like, you're going to lose. The only
I don't think either of them are getting beaten. So.
Well, that's true. But what I'm saying is, if DeSantis were to be the one knocked off, then Rubio would get knocked off as a sort of a ripple effect, if you will.
Yeah.
That is not going to happen if you try to target Rubio, because he's not hated enough. He's not. He's disliked.
No, he's weaselly and annoying, but he's not hated.
He doesn't get like, oh my God, I got to give all my money to
why
stop
do people feel like that about people like Ted Cruz? Like, I don't understand. I find him infuriating.
No, it's
like, I want to punch him in his vagina.
May I please? Walker, don't worry about it. We are about to finish for the evening, so you'll be able to see it in just a few minutes. Again,
so do we have, I'm assuming we have, is there, when people look in the link in the description, is there something that just is a link to the Patreon? I think there is. And I think that we put that in our descriptions. I'm pretty sure we do.
We do. But again, like I said, we are trying to build up support for the channel through Patreon. It's very important. And again, if you like our content, if you like what we're doing, remember, we do not take a salary. This is about helping build community grassroots support for the things that we're trying to do. Things like community gardens. Things
I
like
want you to
community
stop saying that
plazas.
because at some point we might be able to take a salary. So like,
I have no intention of that.
okay, well, that's good for you. I
Yeah,
have no
well,
problem with
give
making
Jen
a few
make
dollars.
money.
I have no
Give Jen
problem with
money.
making a few
Yeah,
dollars.
Jen wants to make a few bucks.
I
You're like,
do.
well, you know,
If I can find a way to get paid doing what I'm doing, then yeah. But
Oh.
stop saying we're not taking a salary. I don't need to write that in stone.
yeah, that's true.
Right now we're not, because there is none. So you say it like it's some virtue, like it's so virtuous.
Well, no, I think it's important that people know that what
That
we're
is true.
trying to
Right
do
now,
is
all
really
of our
help.
money does go back into the community.
And again, I
Everything
don't want
does.
to dis, and I don't want to, I have nothing against other content creators. You do what you have to do, but I don't really see anybody else doing what we're doing. I think we kind of are unique in that regard.
Well,
are focusing.
because we're a live stream, but we're also a podcast. So we have podcast content interviews that you get from people that do podcasts. And that's not usually what you see on the live streams. Live streams are generally just talking heads going back and forth and getting clicks. So we're more of a podcast content on a live stream format.
Last
But
time,
yeah,
guys, it really does help. $5 or $10 Patreons or patrons this evening will get this beautiful Lulu sticker, along with, if you're a $5 patron, you will get the
generational change.
band.
It's a hemp bracelet, and then we also have the jerseys for our $10 patrons. So,
which is really awesome if you think about it.
so you guys get
It's an
merch.
investment worth making.
You guys get merch, but I will say that this was my brainchild. I dreamt of this Lulu sticker, and I'm very pleased to have created.
Wave goodbye to Jen. This is the last time you're going to see her in
Oh,
studio.
you make it sound like I'm going so far. Yeah, I'm going to be in Asheville, and yeah, I have my little generation.
I'm going to be like Kramer here, being able to handle the studio all by myself and doing really crazy stuff. I mean, you never know. Might hold it
I'm
down.
going to
might
have to
not.
teach you how to go in on the closer angle.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe that might be a good idea. I'll try that. We'll see what happens.
For our age difference,
I'm ready
you're
for my close up, Mr.
for
DeVille.
our age difference, you're way not as technologically where you ought to be.
I just don't
compared to
invest
me.
as much time in it as I should, and that's not true because you don't know what I can do on social media and things like that.
That's
So-
not tech. That's just marketing. So what I'm talking about is tech. I never said you weren't a good salesperson.
Okay, fair enough. I think I'm a good salesperson.
You're a great salesperson. I just think you're technologically challenged, disproportionate to your age. Like, I feel like I'm more tech savvy in 9 out of 10 times than you are, and I'm like the oldest person around.
Oh, I think we have one more guest. Before
Oh
we go.
God, no.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
God, no, not him.
No,
All right, Susie, you can get off now. She hates the
Hey, Jen, I
imitations.
just wanted you to know. Come on, man. I want to let everybody know that I did a really important thing today. I signed legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Do you know how important that is, man?
Do you even know what Juneteenth is?
Of course I do. It's some day that's going to be important to people that have, I can't remember. But anyway, I think it's very important that we talk about the importance of having a federal holiday that does nothing to help anybody. Am I right? Come on, man. You got everybody. I talk about bipartisanship all the time.
This is bipartisan uselessness.
Well, the Republicans joined us.
Well, of course they did. Look, if there's one thing you guys could all agree on, it's feckless nonsense.
I don't know, man. I don't really want to worry about that. What I do worry about is, can we make a deal? Because here are the facts, Jack. You got to make deals in Washington. And we made a great deal today. We got everybody to sign on to the legislation. I don't know if
Do you know what Black people prefer than Juneteenth? Healthcare. Healthcare. And a living wage. That's what actually Black people prefer, because you know what? That's what all people prefer.
Look, I know I made promises, but I don't know how to keep them.
Yeah, well, you promised a $2,000 stimulus check. You promised a $15 minimum wage.
Man, I didn't promise that. I promised that I would give them an additional $1,400.
No, Joe.
Yeah, no, that's what I promised. I'm pretty sure that's what I said.
Take your Adderall, Joe.
I don't take anything. Maybe I should. I don't know.
The only thing that would make that more realistic is if the eyelids closed. The eyelids need to be able to close.
Are they closed now?
They're closed now.
I'm trying my best. How am I doing as president? Am I doing okay?
No, you're not, Joe. You're doing nothing. You're maintaining the absolute lowest form of status quo possible without being Donald Trump. That's basically the gist of what you're doing.
Come on, man.
Yeah. So, you're
just a little bit better than that. But I appreciate your concern. But we did get a deal done today.
You got nothing done today, Joe.
Listen here, Jack or Jill or whatever you want to call yourself.
You got Juneteenth as a holiday.
But that's a deal.
That's not a deal,
It's a big
Joe.
deal. It's a big effing deal.
No, it's a day in history that should have already just been taught because it should just be taught.
Yeah, because of me, it's not going to be taught.
Great,
Doesn't
Joe.
that count for something?
No, not as much as your crime bill, Joe. Let's talk about your crime bill.
Let's not talk about that. I don't even remember when I did that.
Of course.
That's too long ago.
No,
man.
yeah, well, I assure you that if
At
you
the
were to
time,
go out and
everyone
poll
was.
Black people, they're more infinitely concerned with that crime bill than they are with celebrating Juneteenth as a national holiday.
I don't agree.
All right,
I don't
well,
agree.
I'm just saying, I know some Black folks.
Oh, I think I'm doing a great job.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Today, anyway. Did you see how I yelled at that reporter the other day? She tried
No,
to twist my words, man.
it's
Can't
not
do
hard.
that.
All
No,
right.
instead, listen, I don't really have a lot of words to say. So
That's
it's
for
not hard
sure.
to
Now,
twist.
and therein, that
That's
we
true.
agree.
Am I right?
On that we agree.
Am
You're
I
a
right?
man of very few words. That
So
makes
I got
sense.
some really amazing news, guys. Can you believe it? Jen's going to be gone, and I'm going to be running the show.
You make it sound like I'm leaving. I'm just not going to be in studio. You're still going to have to.
Oh, no, you're going
I'm
on a trip.
concerned because you're. Yeah, I
Listen,
am
you've
going
been
on a
saying
trip.
A lot of nasty things about me, and you're going to be going on a trip for a while.
I'm
You're
going
gonna
to the
be
mountains. I have to go.
Yeah,
The
that's
mountains
exactly-
are calling, and
Yeah,
I
the
must
mountains are
go.
calling you.
And
That's
I
where
must
you're gonna
go.
stay.
John Muir.
No, hey, listen, you may not be coming back. I'm just saying. You know,
I'm coming back.
we're going to have you under surveillance and everything.
That doesn't
But-
surprise me.
But again, we made a great deal today, and we changed absolutely nothing. Just like I said was going to be the case. Remember? I said nothing would fundamentally change, and I kept my word. Come on, man. Ain't that great?
You know what I find interesting is that you could sit there and do that. But let's say, for example, that I did good imitations. Let's say I did good imitations. And let's say I put on a Kamala mask and I was doing that. There's no way I could get away with doing that. I'd get killed.
No.
I'd be
Again,
called racial
that's
and cultural
that's miscultural
cultural appropriation.
man.
Yes, I
Can't
know.
do that.
Well, that's fortunately for you. You're just another white guy imitating another white guy, so nobody
It pays to
cares.
be a white guy. You're doing
yes,
a
it
really great
does.
job, man.
No one's as cute as my white dog.
I like that white dog. That's really sweet.
But you like hair, and my dog has hair. Oh,
Oh man, I really like that dog. Can you bring that dog closer? I'm just being me. Good
Oh,
old
yeah.
Uncle Joe. You call me Crazy Joe.
it's just people don't like to be pet. You know what I
Are
mean?
you sure about that?
Oh, I'm very sure.
I don't know, man. I think we're doing okay.
All right, you know, I need one of those hooks, like from vaudeville.
We'll see you
My mom-
guys. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Peace out, all.
Peace.
You will see me again in the mountain.
Yes, you will.
In the mountain.